Good morning, church. I had to collect myself a little bit after that introduction. Oh my goodness. Well, y'all need to know I've been a great fan of your pastor for many years, long before she was Reverend anything. And it is both an honor and a pleasure to be here with you today. I understand that your theme for the month is nurturing resilience. And my topic this morning is soul care for a time of collapse and emergence. And I know that some of you have been reading my book this month. I want to thank you for that. I'm really looking forward to our conversation this afternoon. It's a treat for me to be able to sit with you and to hear what spoke to you and what questions you have. Much of my message this morning comes from the book, so it might sound a little familiar to some of you, and I ask you to bear with me. The book opens with these words: "We stand at a threshold. The structures of a world built on domination and division are crumbling, but still fighting to hold on. Each day brings news of worsening ecological, political, and social collapse. It can be tempting to want to disconnect, to ease the intensity of the pain, to distract or numb ourselves in all the ways we do. The answer, however, is not to disconnect, but to connect more deeply, to find strength in something more powerful than the chaos, our belonging to a wholeness that is ancient, infinite, and eternal." Nice words, right? But how do we move this from idea into embodiment? How do we connect with that larger wholeness? You know, folks talk about the importance of self-care and resilience, self-care rather for our resilience and sustainability as people committed to social justice and collective liberation. Perhaps some of you came of age as I did in a time when self-care was dismissed as frivolous or self-indulgent. A time when it was considered a given that activists will experience burnout. And that badge of martyrdom, right, was seen as proof of our commitment to the cause, whatever the cause may have been. I've seen many people become casualties of their activism and eventually drop out of movement work, sometimes embittered, sometimes feeling guilty, and almost always wounded. But that doesn't serve anyone, right? Not the movements we care about, not the causes we are committed to, and certainly not the people involved. But even self-care doesn't go deep enough, right? The term self-care is often used to refer to things that help us deal with the stress or take the edge off our pain. A glass of wine after a hard day, zoning out in front of the TV with your favorite comfort food, you know, maybe if for a special treat, a trip to the spa. And because this country is so good at commodification, an entire self-care industry has developed as a way to capitalize on people's distress. This kind of self-care, in quotes, comes with a price tag, right? A price tag out of reach of many of the people who are most in need of renewal. Now, don't get me wrong. Stress relieving and physically nurturing activities are vital and can themselves be a matter of justice where such care has been systematically denied. but I hope we won't stop there. We need something more meaningful, more transformative, to stay connected with the place within that inspires us to do the work of our calling, and that allows us to bring our wisest, truest, most visionary selves to it on an ongoing basis. This is necessary for all of us, not just self-identified activists, right? We are all of us living in the struggle and tribulation of these times. So how do we move beyond the resuscitation model of self-care to root ourselves in something substantial and life-giving enough to support our flourishing? How do we sustain the soul, right? The spiritual center, the deeper vision, the inmost heart that can inspire and guide our work and every aspect of our lives as we embody our commitments to personal and collective transformation? We can reach beyond self-care to what I call soul care, engaging the practices that help us cultivate an inner connection to something greater than ourselves from which we can draw strength. That something may be one another. It may be our ancestors or cultural heritage. For many of us, it's nature. And what I was so excited when I drove up and saw all of this beautiful, almost like a park as part of the campus. That's where I draw so much spiritual nourishment. And then for many, it's higher power, God, the sacred, however we may name it or understand or relate with it. For almost 20 years, I was blessed to lead an organization in Oakland called One Life Institute. Our mission statement was to nurture, inspire, and sustain people committed to healing and justice. And in the course of that work, we began using the term soul care to indicate this deeper kind of connection that I'm talking about this morning. In our workshops and retreats, we described it as the practices that help us to meet whatever we are facing with blank and blank. What goes in those blanks are the qualities of the version of ourselves we most aspire to be. Now, it's going to be unique for each person, and it may even shift from time to time. For me, love and wisdom are the qualities that I most hope and strive to embody. That's what goes in my fill in the blanks, right? And I want to invite you to take a moment right now, right where you are, to just turn within, take a breath, and ask how you would fill in those blanks for yourself. What are the two qualities that represent the version of yourself you most yearn to be on a good day? Don't answer from your head. Just listen within and see what arises without judgment or censorship. You can always change it later. And now, because there's power in witness and affirmation, I invite you, if you're willing, right, to turn to somebody sitting near you and just share your two qualities with one another. If you would take a moment and do that now. It's not a long conversation, that's for later. This is just sharing your qualities. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you. Now we can take those words, those qualities, and set them as guiding intentions, right? We can make them our anchors, our touchstones. They're not out there somewhere and we have to find them and somehow lure them in, right? They're already within us, waiting to be given full expression. Soul care asks what practices and choices will support us in embodying those qualities, in deepening our sense of connection to that something larger than ourselves from which we draw strength, our place of belonging to the sacred, to the wholeness. In one of my classes, and I don't know, maybe it was even a class that Reverend Amelia took in seminary, I invite my students to develop what I call a spiritual 911 list, an emergency contact list. See, when I was growing up, there was one phone in the household, a rotary dial phone attached to the wall in the kitchen. I'm seeing some nodding heads, so I'm among family, or I'm among generational age mates or something. And at your house, next to it was on the wall taped an emergency contact list, right? The fire department, the pediatrician, poison control, the babysitter, I don't know, but things like that you might need in an emergency, right? The idea was that when your house is burning, it's not the time to have to start thumbing through the phone book looking for the number. Similarly, when we are traumatized, exhausted, or burnt out, we may not be able to remember the things that open and restore our spirits. So it's helpful to have a written list that you can refer to and continue to add to on an ongoing basis. And I tell people you can even crowdsource this, like ask your friends, ask each other during the coffee hour, right? Or coffee 20 minutes before you come to book group. What are some of the ways that they connect, that they remember that they are part of this one sacred wholeness that breathes through all of life? How do they replenish their souls? It could be you find connection through prayer or meditation, or perhaps a particular song or piece of music that lets you breathe again, or a movie that you know will make you cry and soften your heart when it grows brittle. You might have a favorite tree that you visit, or a spot by the lake, or a particular poem or a passage in a sacred text that opens the way to the divine. Maybe for you it's gratitude practice, chanting, a ritual, journaling, creative expression. Maybe it's sitting with a wise friend who helps you tune back in to what is true. The key is to find what works for you and to have enough soul care options so that when one practice is not available or it's just not connecting for you, you can turn to others. Now the goal, of course, Reverend Amelia, I know you know this, is not just having a list of emergency practices to call us back when burnout takes its toll, right? But cultivating communion as a way of life, making the commitment to integrate these rituals of connection as part of our everyday. Not using spirituality as an escape or anesthesia, but as a source of nourishment, insight, healing, as a practice of growing our sense of belonging to that sacred oneness. This embodied remembrance is essential as we face the extremity of these times. Family, so much of the horror that we're experiencing grows out of some humans, not all, but some humans, forgetting that belonging and even losing sight of their own humanity. One of the greatest gifts of remembering our belonging, our oneness with that larger life, is that it shifts the balance of power. What I mean by that is that we are not doing this work of healing and transformation in isolation. We're part of a loving, intelligent wholeness that is so much greater than the forces of any empire. And we are part of a transgenerational collective project of liberation and awakening that began long before our current generation and will continue long after we are gone. We're in league, not only with other humans, but with ancestors and coming generations, with trees and water and mountains and fire and air. We can call on all of that and be guided and empowered by it. Soul care shifts the very ground of our engagement as we meet these times. Our oneness with one another, with nature, with ancestors and coming generations, and with all of life. This is what sustains us. Our practice, then, is returning to that remembrance, that felt connection over and over and over again, and rooting ourselves in that.